We're at 5 past now, so I think we will kick things off. So as I just mentioned, this is our third session in the Modern Learner Masterclass. For those of you who are on the call who haven't seen those first two sessions, they are available on our YouTube channel if you'd like to check them out. But this session, like I say, is very accessible and you'll be able to follow along with all the key talking points, even if you haven't been a part of those first two sessions. So today it's Juliet who's going to be presenting. She's going to be taking us through the future skills that modern learners will need to thrive in our ever-evolving workplace. For those of you who don't know Juliet, she is the MD of both Growth Engineering and Iridescent Technologies, and she's a real expert in the areas of learner engagement, the neuroscience of learning, and the application of AI to solve learning challenges. So I think this is going to be a really great session. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm now going to hand over to Juliet to kick things off.
Hello, everybody. And again, a massive thank you for joining us on this voyage of discovery. I think we all of us who are in the L&D space know that we are at a crucial time in terms of future skills. The world is changing, and as L&D professionals, we really do stand at the top of that mountain, helping our colleagues to kind of climb, what is going to be, magnitudinal change over the next sort of 5 to sort of 15 years. So the goal of this future skills seminar is to look critically at the challenges that organizations are going to face with regards to assessing their future skills, but also to talk about some of the structures and some of the strategies and implementations we have been working on early stage, pilot stage, to try and help organizations move through this kind of incredible time of transition. Core to this presentation is really the idea of how people are thinking and feeling as we move forward. So from a kind of neuroscience perspective, our brains are often they do respond with anxiety and resistance to a time of change. And so it's really important for us as L&D leaders to be able to lead our organizations through this time of change with kind of practical solutions in terms of how we're going to transform our organizations to meet these ever-changing needs. So as Harry said, Harry kicked off the first two webinars with understanding the modern learner, because obviously we've now got multiple generations working in the workplace, really understanding who the modern learner is and how we can, the second webinar, looking at how we can engage the modern learner. So what we can do in order to maximize their concentration and their attention with regards to applying new ideas, within the workplace. And then finally, this one that I'm leading is very much on the future skills that organizations are going to have to get to grips with, which are fundamentally different, I think, than the other skills, functional skills that maybe L&D has been focused on. And we're going to step through that in a kind of logical way, but also focusing quite a lot on kind of like the neuroscience principles in terms of how we can really make it a safe space for people to move into, to upskill and change their understanding of what's expected from them in their work. So we're going to start off with basically looking at the major forces that are reshaping the future of work specifically. So we all know that AI and automation are going to be critical parts of, the future. But there's also other things like demographic shifts, global shifts in the way organizations are managing their workforce, and also how people are working. So working from home, but also the gig economy. So we're going to examine some of those things. And again, in the back of our minds, this amount of change happening to people, within our organization, does create a threat response. It does create resistance. It does create resistance to change. And so what we have to do as L&D professionals is really understand how we are going to bring people back from being worried and concerned and actually embrace these changes. And a key theme of today is all around personalization. If we can utilize new technologies like AI to really hyper personalize the learning in and around where the organization needs to go and where that person's role needs to go, we can handhold them through into the next phase of their career development. And so it's this idea of really understanding what is needed from each role and being able to communicate that clearly to the individual and then provide the support in order for them to move forward successfully into this time of great opportunity, innovation, and quite frankly, excitement. So just a little bit about me. I know Harry's already introduced me. I think the only thing that I'd like you to take away from this slide is that I've spent the last sort of 20, 25 years of my life developing learning technology, and I've loved every single second of it. But technology in itself is not what really drives me. What I am really interested in is the idea of how we can unleash the inner talent of every single human on the planet through a deep understanding of the way the brain works and how we can create engagement strategies that can be deployed on SaaS platforms and AI platforms that really do engage and empower our learners. So what you will see through this presentation, I hope, is not a presentation about a technology or a platform, but it's much more about an approach that we need to have with regards to deploying L&D strategies. And, I have been very, very lucky with my teams in growth engineering and in Iridescent to work with some of the biggest companies in the world. And, all companies, I think, are really looking at this seismic change that we're about to leap into with the same intrepidation, but some are being bolder in moving forward to embrace than others. And so we're also going to be talking about that as well. So let's, first of all, I want to establish a framework about thinking about skills development, because we have to get away from this idea that skills development is about, I look at my library and I've got, leadership changes, I've got leadership content, I've got, health and safety content, I've got, et cetera, et cetera. What we need to do is we need to chunk up a little bit, and going down the rabbit hole of personalization, we need to really understand how jobs are made up. Okay, jobs are made up of three core types of skills, and as we move towards this hyper personalization, we need to have a lot of control over these three types of skills that we are pushing into individuals' development roadmaps. So the first skill is foundational skills. So we all know foundational skills in terms of teamwork, listening, those kind of things. But what we are moving towards with regards to foundational skills is we need to train our people to have more cognitive flexibility and more adaptability in how they take on new skills. So the messages in and around foundational skills still need to be things like all the soft skills that we've been training, but it very much needs to be in and around, we need to get you to have an element of cognitive flexibility and adaptability, because the organization is going to need those skills in order to move forward. Another foundational skill is a core idea of digital literacy. We can't have people in our teams that are not happy to move forward in this age of kind of digital transformation. So we really need to ensure that people are comfortable with digital literacy. So when we look at foundational skills, rather than looking at foundational skills in terms of leadership, teamwork, we must ensure that we are leaning in and training for cognitive flexibility, adaptability, and also digital literacy. The next thing that we need to look at is functional skills. There will be lots of jobs that won't change in terms of the functional skills needed to do that particular role, but most roles will be affected by the AI human collaboration. Okay, so we need to ensure that roles are looked at in terms of how this human and AI collaboration will take part, and we need to actively train and support our learners in ensuring that they know which of their functional skills are going to stay human and which of those functional skills are going to be automated and are going to be taken over by AI, right? The more we can have conversations in and around this, the easier the transformation is going to be. The second thing in functional skills that we really need to focus on is this idea of data interpretation and synthesis. Because we now live in a world where AI can bring and deliver so much information to us, we need to ensure that the functional skills for that individual's job, they can still see through all the data and make sense of and synthesize the data that's important that is being delivered back by their AI, right? So these are functional skills specific to individual roles that we need to ensure they understand how those functional skills need to change. And then the final area is future skills. Now, when people talk about future skills, you know, they say, oh, you just need to know about AI, you need to know about data science. But that's not quite what we mean by future skills, because we are going to be working alongside our AI digital, you know, companions. We as humans need to hone our key skills, okay? And what humans are really, really good at, and what we need to, you know, increasingly train up our teams on, is things like ethical reasoning and value alignment. Because we are going to be relying on our, you know, co-worker agents, we need to understand how those co-worker agents that do not have the capacity for ethical reasoning or value alignment, how we need to manage those agents in order to, you know, live in a harmonious world where the organization is moving forward together, you know, meeting its innovation challenges. And the other thing that we need to do is that we need to have a bigger sense of experimenting, design, and creating meaning that is specifically human. And so these are other things that need to be put into that role, right? Because there is going to be a lot of fear in terms of automation and AI and how the workforce will you know, be augmented with AI agents. We really do need to ensure that you know, we are making meaning in these roles, and you know, adapting and getting a deep understanding of those future skills that are really human-centric for that particular role. So in terms of the forces that are shaping work, it's very clear that the shift has started, but you know, we haven't really seen it anywhere close to peak. So we are at the very, very beginning, you know, of this transformation. But what we have seen over the last sort of 5 years, and what we will continue to see, is organizational transformation that makes organizations much, much flatter, much more fluid in terms of their hierarchies. And this will emerge as basically AI agents take on more decision making. They basically, the knowledge work becomes more distributed between humans and AI. The other thing that we're going to see a lot of is changing power dynamics. So basically, we're going to see, you know, experts shift from knowledge retention into knowledge synthesis and application. So that idea of the human brain being creative and innovating on top of, you know, mechanical tasks that AI are very good at is going to be, you know, critical. So those who can basically effectively collaborate with AI systems are going to gain more influence around their organization, regardless of traditional hierarchies. So those individuals in the organization that lean in to AI using agents will be the people that will succeed within these organizations, because that's where the market and that's where the world is going. And so as a consequence of that, we have to totally reimagine learning and development. Learning and development will become more and more important to organizations, because if our people can't pivot and change and, you know, can't, you know, rise to, you know, the challenge, then the organization as a whole will be left behind. The other thing that we're seeing is individual roles and career paths. So lots of hybrid roles we're seeing. We're seeing an increased kind of emphasis on how people approach their work. The younger generations are probably looking for more meaning in their work. So there are distinct changes in terms of where people saw, traditionally they saw their career paths going, from now their expectations for what work is. And then finally, there are, some big neurological and learning implications, which us as L&D, we need to be really clear on the fact that we're going to be at the head of this. So in a time of massive transformation, we need to ensure that we understand what the majority of people are going to be feeling when they're approaching this sense of change. And for most people, it will be slightly terrifying. So there'll be people like to work in a way where they know that when they're coming to work, they know what they've got to do, they know what they will be doing in years' time. And so and what we're asking them to do is increasingly keep up with technological change, which drains the brain and basically brings with it a lot of fear and tension in the individuals in our company. And so it's really important for us as L&D practitioners to be able to hold their hands through this time. So what we really need to do is be very, very clear on what their job is now, what their job will look like in the future, and how we are going to help them navigate between where they are now and where they need to be in the future. So, it's definitely an exciting time for us in L&D at the moment. So in terms of what we're seeing in terms of, organizational adaptation, and what is happening out there is I have the privilege of obviously being very much part of the growth engineering team for the last 20 years. And then last year, my anniversary was actually a year yesterday, actually, I started Iridescent Technology to really focus on a bleeding edge AI project in this particular area, in talent and learning and development. And what I'm seeing at the moment, with the viewpoint of growth engineering still doing really well in terms of learning technologies, micro learning, gamification, but then we're in terms of Iridescent looking at these bleeding edge AI projects, is there are many companies out there that have been strategically tasked, the L&D and talent functions have been strategically tasked to look at how they can deploy AI in a fundamentally different way within their L&D departments and across their talent. And of course, this brings with it, huge amount of excitement, but also a cautious approach. So what we've been looking at is a series of different pilots to basically try and understand how we can manage the LLM layer and manage the data lake layer in order to make learning as hyper-personalized as possible and meet some of the challenges that we're seeing at the moment. We're also seeing, a lot of capability restructuring within organizations. So looking at, do I understand what I've currently got in my organization? Do I understand what I'm going to need in the future? And, what restructuring am I going to have to do in order to meet those innovation challenges? We're also seeing the fact that learning ecosystems are just they are transforming. So it is slowly, but it is definitely happening. People are very aware that learning needs to be more relevant. It needs to be more hyper-personalized. It needs to work for the learner. It needs to take in, neurodiversity applications. But most of all, it has to be something the learners want to do rather than are being forced to do. If we are going to get learners to want to come on this journey of change with us, we absolutely need to make sure that that learning is as personalized as possible. And the other thing that all of this brings up is this idea of how do we ensure that we are not just pushing more content out there without context? So I see a lot of AI applications, like, I can help you, create content. I can help you do this. I can help you do that. The problem is with that is that there is no governance framework in and around that content. And that is the thing that is not helping organizations, nor is adding value to the individual. So I will talk about that during this presentation as well. The other thing is that we're seeing a huge widening in terms of performance gaps. So some individuals in organizations are really, making sure that, in their own time outside of work, they are upskilling. They've got a highly adaptive capacity, and they are moving forward with a kind of zealousness with regards to the future technology. There are other people in organizations that aren't. And, there's a great piece of McKinsey research that basically says that those organizations that have people that are willing to embrace the future with a really kind of hands-on, excited approach, are going to be basically delivering, 3 to 5 times higher revenue growth than kind of their less, quote unquote, transformed competitors. The other thing we're seeing is talent polarization. So those people that have got high focus on, digital skills and implementing AI projects in a certain vertical. So I would describe myself as one of those people. So I'm not a technology specialist, but I am a specialist in delivering AI applications within, the talent field. We are seeing big polarization in the value that those people can add to an organization. So the underlying message there is, wherever you work, whatever you do, whatever your role is, this kind of enthusiasm with regards to new technologies will be key to your value in the marketplace. And because of that, there is an innovation asymmetry. Those organizations that aren't moving forward with developing these talents are, undoubtedly will be left, will be left behind. And of course, the costs of falling behind are massive. Market erosion, talent acquisition, strategic debt, career vulnerability, the list goes on and on and on. And we, at the heart of L&D, obviously have the responsibility to put our hand forward and bring up as many of these people in our organization to help them transform into valuable, people for the organization in the future. And that is our responsibility. That is what we are here to do. So, in terms of, the economy, we can see that the economy is shifting. We can see that, jobs are moving, globally. We can see that the way of, us working is just fundamentally different than past generations. The gig economy continues to expand. We're trying to ensure that we train people almost as quick as they move from job to job. But we have to train them in order for them to become effective and valuable, for our company. So in terms of, the globalized workforce, a lot of the companies that, we are working with do have global workforces, which means that there is a big shift and change as to where these people, are. And there is some real challenges with regards to looking at the amount of learning and the amount of knowledge sharing that these global teams are having to do. Even if the knowledge sharing takes place, in the UK over multiple offices, we are seeing a lot of cognitive load challenge. And what I mean by that is that human beings really struggle with having multiple digital things thrown at them that aren't directly relevant. Basically, what happens is they just kind of zone out. And this idea that more content is going to solve the problem is just completely and utterly untrue. It is context and personalization of that content that makes it more relevant and more valuable to the individual, but also to the organization. And this is the challenge that we have to wrap our heads around as L&D professionals. We are not one to many. It's not a one size fits all. It's how can we ensure that every individual gets the right talent and learning development for their role now and in the future. And of course, doing that means that the learning becomes a lot more intense. So there is a real kind of digital presence, kind of cognitive overload, at risk. And we need to make sure that how we are delivering is in a way that doesn't overwhelm learners. So at the same time as having this huge challenge in terms of what are we going to train them, then how are we going to train them in terms of it needs to be different, it needs to be personalized, it needs to be radically personalized. We also need to ensure that because of the intensity, if we are literally providing one-on-one coaching, through AI automation or however it might be, that we're not overloading them and they are able to apply those skills as well as know those skills. So I'm sure most of you on the call are, have a similar love for, the Bloom's taxonomy and what Bloom's taxonomy allows us to understand about how we can get learning to be more sticky, but particularly when we are doing, one-on-one agentic, coaching or learning and development, like we're developing at Zavmo AI, we do need to be really, really clear that the amount of time and the cognitive load that we are putting on learners is really quite intense. So, there's lots of different things that are emerging with regards to these pilots. And, I'll be talking about what we're doing in Zavmo AI and how we've tried to sort of bring all of these things together more at the end of the presentation. So another thing that we really need to give a lot of thought to is our wonderful Gen Z workplace, our Gen Z workforce. I work with pretty much an all Gen Z team in iridescent technology. And I think one of the reasons why it's been easier to get them to come into the new iridescent world is that because we were really having some crazy ideas with what we wanted the future of learning to look like. And I think Gen Z are just digital, they were born with digitization all around them. They're very, very, completely different than, my generation with regards to how they utilize their time online, how they utilize social media. And as we look to the generation after Gen Z, obviously what we're going to see is people coming into the workforce that basically were just grown up with AI. That's the only thing they've known. They haven't even known, Googling, that won't be a thing for them. So the workplace characteristics and the generations of people that we are getting to come through will have a massive impact in terms of the differences of how the different generations think and how we can get them to learn, through, AI, and as opposed to some of the more mature generations in the workplace that really do struggle. They struggle with e-learning, and now they're going to have to struggle with a whole new agentic learning agenda coming through. The other thing that we see with the younger generations is they do understand the importance of self-directed learning. So obviously they were caught up in the whole COVID thing, but also they have been learning on YouTube with YouTube tutorials for the longest time. But that doesn't mean to say that that is the development and they can just stop there, because managing organizations and being in charge of L&D is obviously, we need to ensure that the learning they're doing aligns with the company missions, visions, values, the company's goals, and is basically moving the company forward. So even though they are much more receptive to this idea of self-learning, we do need to ensure that we're providing everything that they need to understand in a way that they rally towards. The other thing is that there is a real kind of increase in mental health awareness and diversity. So the other thing that we're seeing a lot of is this idea of the new learning tools coming through, like Zavmo AI, which is, essentially, an AI agent talent and learning platform. Will that cope with neurodiversity? Because neurodiversity and mental health, cognitive overload, these are things that the younger generations really do understand. They really do understand the impacts of ADHD, dyslexia, on their learning, but they still have found ways to mitigate that and kind of move forward. And so any new learning platforms or new ways of learning utilizing AI need to incorporate those kind of elements. So there's lots of different changes with regards to new generations coming through and how they will want to be developed in terms of talent and learning. The other thing is that we've just had lots of transformations with regards to the job market. So the job market is massively transforming. We spoke earlier briefly about the gig economy. Some roles are becoming obsolete through automation, but on the same hand, we've seen a massive increase in the number of jobs that AI will create. And certainly running an AI first company like Iridescent, I am well aware that there are lots of people that want to get into development of AI, and it will create a huge amount of opportunity. There is absolutely no doubt. But the reality is that, as we've said before, rapid evolution naturally triggers fear responses. So lots of people are locking down, lots of people are just sort of saying, it hasn't happened yet, it won't affect me, and it's not going to happen. But any organization that chooses to have that philosophy is ultimately not going to win out in the innovation battle. And this is again why I keep coming back to the idea of the solution to this is personalized talent and learning development. Okay, we need to show very, very clearly how their role now will be transformed and what that road of transformation looks like. So they can be very, very clear as to what their development will look like in order to add value to the organization. And that hyper-personalization is the key to creating a safe space for the organization to evolve. So the real focus of Zavmo and other AI, platforms that might be coming through is this idea of, first of all, hyper-personalization, but secondly, there must be an element of understanding cognitive overload to ensure that the learning experience is one that the learner actually does enjoy. So it's the safety to start, and it's the safety and curiosity that we need to build into that learning journey to ensure that they continue down that learning path and we don't lose them. So, within now the kind of context is established, let's look at frameworks of how organizations can really practically assess what future skills they need. So basically, this is a kind of systematic approach in terms of how organizations can really prepare for the future and start thinking about the overall strategy they're going to need to deploy in order to move these forward. And of course, what kind of AI enhanced assessment tools can help along the way. So the first thing is that we need to start with kind of external analysis. Okay, so within the confines of most people's learning and development roles, they are very much focused on learning and development, rather than being kind of McKinsey analysts and being able to look at the entire scope of their industry and be able to make thoughtful predictions on where their individual company and their industry will go with regards to the future. But the good news is for L&D professionals is there are organizations and structures out there that help L&D departments understand current best practice in terms of roles and best practice that is going to be needed role by role in the future. Okay, so what we have been experimenting with Zavmo AI is national occupational standards. So national occupational standards basically cover the majority of roles across the UK, well, in any kind of first world economy, basically. So national occupational standards basically map the majority of industries and the roles within those industries. This is a vast library. There's something like 600,000 different standards for each individual role. So our starting point here is looking at where the company is now and benchmarking that against best practice. So the national occupational standards are basically created by the biggest companies within specific industries. They get together and they say, right, what do people in this industry do, and what kind of benchmarks and standards of excellence should they be working to? So we have basically ingested the national occupational standards into an AI in order to allow companies to benchmark their people across any role. So this can be finance, customer service, marketing, sales, it doesn't make any difference, to get an idea of where their people are, right? So that is the starting point, finding a set of standards that you can basically get ground zero to your organization. So most of the organizations that we speak to have many different standards across different departments, and that makes it really difficult to get a holistic idea of where your organization might be. But this external analysis is a really, really important part. Where are you now in terms of your future foundational and functional skills within your organization? And where are you going to need to be in order to, claim innovation and move forward, in a good way? So that the start point is this external analysis. How do I shape up compared to, what is going on, elsewhere? The next thing is we need to look at internal analysis. So we need to be really, really clear on where our organization wants to go. So we can make certain assumptions that most organizations are driven by the profit motive, primarily. So the organization needs to be more efficient, it needs to be more effective in what it does, and it needs to innovate. Okay. So if we take that as literally the bottom line, we can, then begin to say, right, so if we understand where does our organization lie on those, on that, are we making improvements in efficiency in every department? Are we being more effective in, the way we innovate, the way we manage customers, the way we secure customers, the way we, and if the answer to that is, I think we need some improvements, then obviously, that's something that you can look at how you've benchmarked your people and assess, what development needs to go on in order to meet, that the primary directive of, driving revenue and profit. So that's the next stage. So that internal analysis, being really, really clear on, has this organization got the skills that it needs in order to compete. And then finally, there's obviously the gap analysis. So we know where we've got to go. We know where we are now. What do we need to put in place in order to ensure that everybody can join us on this journey, at the same time as making them feel psychologically safe, right? Because that is the core that, of, warm and fuzzy L&D. That's what we exist to do, right? Make people happy, excited, motivated, and thrilled about what their future could look like within our organizations. So, we're under pressure, guys. This is an exciting time. This is a time where we really need to be looking, into innovation and how we can kind of step through into the next part and really make learning and development a core part of, how our organizations are going to pivot and grow in, in the future. So once we know where the skills gaps are, then we need to find a way of basically filling those skills gaps in a way that is far more hyper-personalized. Okay, so there are a couple of things here in terms of the development plan. We need to stop looking at holistic development plans that are what I would say is one-to-many, right? So we're doing a health and safety push. Everyone in the organization is going to do health and safety. This is what it's going to look like. We need to stop doing that. And we also need to stop doing things like, okay, we're going to do a set of, micro learning units, and those micro learning units are going to cover the area of soft skills. I'm going to put it on my library. And if people want to go into that library to learn soft skills and leadership, then they can do that. Unfortunately, that time is no longer with us. We need to, as I said in the beginning, provide much more clarity for individuals where their development needs to be in next year, the year after, and the year after. And the only way of doing that is to have specific development paths that are tied to their job descriptions. Okay, so what we are trying to do with Zavmo AI, and I'll come on to the pilots that we're doing here, is tie it to the job descriptions. So first of all, we say, this is the job description, then we do the gap analysis that we've just spoken about, and then we deliver content into that individual's development roadmap in a way that is personalized in and around their job. And we do that, again, by ingesting huge databases. So we have ingested the Ofqual database, which basically covers all academic and professional qualifications across the UK, into Asia, Middle East, and Europe. So we have ingested these professional qualifications. So if you want to be, you know, a chartered accountant, if you want to be a compliance specialist, if you want to be a pensions advisor, the learning specifications for that role, we have ingested. So when Zavmo delivers out this training, the training is specific to how long you've been in the industry, what your role is within your organization, and where that role needs to go in 1, 3, 5 years. Okay, so it's hyper personalization. The one size fits all model is just not going to cut through where we need learning and development to be. So this comprehensive development plan will only work if the learner knows that basically it is, you know, mapped to their role. There's a clear understanding of where that role is going to be in the future, and any learning they do will be of direct relevance to them in terms of an accredited qualification. So it is benchmarked to a form of excellence that they can passport into another career or whoever it might be. So basically, you know, this is just a visual of kind of like the completed assessment process. Now, obviously, you can use any tool to benchmark. You can use any, you know, form of learning library in order to, you know, create development content. But the key thing is, and where we've found the real revolution in learning, is basically mapping it all the way down back to the JD, so that the JD, the case studies, and how the individual is being taught through role play, through case studies, through industry analysis, is directly relevant to their role. And so they get a lot more added value out of the learning experience than they hitherto have with a generic one-to-many kind of approach. So, you know, let's explore kind of specific skills that, you know, maybe, you know, it will become a bit more clear why we need these specific skills in terms of, you know, humanizing soft skills. So what we have come up with is basically 10 skills which we believe will be crucial to future success. And this breaks down into 4 hard or technical skills and 6 soft or interpersonal skills. So let's first start off with the hard skills. So this is really common to you all. We all need to understand AI automation, and we all need to understand data science, but not all of us need to understand it in the same way. If you are a budget holder, if you are, you know, the leader of a department, the way you need to understand AI and automation and data science is very different than somebody who's actually just using ChatGPT on a regular basis. If you've got budget responsibility, i.e. you are responsible for efficiency and effectiveness, driving growth and innovation, right? You need to understand what data you've got, how you can get that data, and how you can exploit it through AI and automation. You need to have an understanding of standard operating procedures, how to write standard operating procedures, how to understand data extraction, and how that data extraction can be pulled into agentic agents in a way, and then you need to make decisions about what's the best use of your time. This is very, very different than somebody who basically is coming into the organization and you just want them to use automation tools and, you know, AI. So again, going back to the hyper-personalization element, we need to have the right AI and data science content for that role, right? And we need to provide learning experiences which ensure that that learner can essentially deploy or do something with that thinking. Now we come on to another 2. So people need to be very, you know, aware of cybersecurity and cloud computing. Again, this is the hard skills. And again, they need to do something with it rather than just, you know what it is if they're at the higher level of the organization. Now we come on to soft skills, and I spoke about this briefly at the beginning of the webinar. Critical thinking. right? We as humans are not built, you know, the same way as AI. AI has certain talents, humans also have certain talents. And we need to lean into what humans are inherently, you know, brilliant at, which is creativity, critical thinking, and innovation. And so we need to ensure that those are core parts of, you know, what we are training people to do. Again, we spoke about this at the beginning of the adaptability. Adaptability is key. We need to instill in our people this idea that they need to adapt, pivot, and change, and walk towards the future with, you know, excitement and, you know, the art of the possible within their hearts. But we also need to understand, particularly as L&D professionals, that we need to be empathetic, because this is a, you know, it's a very kind of scary time. Communication, communication, communication. This is something that basically comes up the whole time. You can never over communicate, especially with regards to, you know, in a time of massive change. So communication throughout the whole organization needs to, you know, become better. We need to be better at communicating what we're doing and how we're dealing with these future challenges. And then, of course, digital literacy. Everybody needs to be able to talk the same language. We spoke earlier in the presentation how different generations are coming into the workforce and how they have very different relationships with technology. And this is why digital literacy needs to be commonly understood throughout the business. So before we wrap up in terms of a couple of case studies, I just want to ask the following questions. Harry's going to put a poll out there. Which skills do you think will be the most crucial in the future workplace? So please click away. We look forward to your thoughts on that.
Okay, we can see some of the results coming in now, Juliet. We've got majority of the votes for critical thinking and adaptability at the moment, but that might change. We'll give it maybe 30 seconds for people to vote, and then we'll see what the most popular and least popular options are, because I always think that's quite interesting to see. Please do keep the votes coming in, guys. We've got 44 votes so far. Yeah, I think you can only vote for one, Julia, so I'd say go for the one that stands out most to you. Just give it a few more seconds. Okay, we're up to 50 votes there, so I think that's a good selection. It looks like the most popular option is critical thinking with 13 of the votes. Least popular is potentially data science with just 1 vote, but then there's also empathy with 2 votes, communication with 2 votes. So those are the least popular options. I think it's very much critical thinking, adaptability, digital literacy, and AI and automation that stood out most to people within that poll. So yeah, interesting to see. Thank you for voting, guys. I will end the poll and hand back over to Juliet.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for that. Right, so just before we wrap up, we just wanted to share a couple of things that we've been working on, a few success stories, because, you know, all of this stuff in terms of theory is all well and good, but I mean, how are we actually applying it, I think is, it's a movable feast, and we're learning as we go. But I just wanted to mention some of the things that we've been working on in Iridescent and also in growth engineering. So first of all, you know, over the last year, I have been working with my fantastic data science and AI team on creating Zavmo AI. And what Zavmo AI is, as I say, is it's basically a personalized talent and learning development AI. So the first thing that we need to understand when we're talking about creating an AI for talent and learning development in your organization is what goes into your data lake. So, you know, the data part of it, because if we don't have the right things going in, then obviously we're going to have rubbish coming out. So the goal of Zavmo AI is firstly to enable people to understand where they are, so that we can help them get to where they need to go. The second thing is to provide hyper-personalized learning paths. So no more one size fits all. Nobody gets the same set of learning. It's a conversation with Zavmo in and around your learning. The next thing that we're trying to do is do proper inline feedback. So every single individual learner, let me give you an example. Zavmo is by nature a very friendly personality. If you don't want to be taught by a friendly personality, over time, you can teach your version of Zavmo not to teach you in a friendly way. If you are dyslexic, like myself, if you suffer from ADHD, Zavmo can basically create learning that is going to be in line with your neurodiversity need. And what we've done here is we basically delivered Zavmo through a conversational interface in the same way. So it looks, very, very similar to any AI you would use. But basically at the top bar, there's a four-step process. The first one is discover. So let Zavmo understand who you are, where you are in your organization, what your ambitions are, what your, learning goals are, and how you want to be taught, right? What do you want? Role play? Do you want Socratic dialogue? Do you want case studies? Do you want scenario-based learning? Do you want quantitative quizzes and tests? So this is basically discovery. Then Zavmo will say, this is what I've come up with. So this is what your development path looks like based on this industry standard and these qualifications. Are you happy with it? So we need to move, we've tried to move away from this idea that learning is done to you. And we want you to say, yes, I'd love to develop in that way because I realize it's important and that's where my job's going. Then the delivery happens. So this is learning conversations. And then finally demonstrations where the learner needs to show that they've met the learning outcomes within the learning specification, right? So, we're all very, in the L&D world, we know our learning objectives, learning outcomes, and assessment criteria. That's what the demonstration stage is all about. So demonstrating you can actually apply the learning to your actual role. And so we've been doing a pilot with a company called Centrica. For those of you in UK and Europe, you might have heard of them, but they're essentially, it's a huge energy company that covers renewables, gas. They have, I think 21,000 employees in the UK, but they also have employees across Europe as well. And they've got regulatory requirements that are quite complex because they're a regulated industry. They've got diverse learning needs. They've also got an insane number of different types of roles. So what has been incredible to me is that we've been doing, forensic accountants, we've been doing gas engineers, we've been doing asset managers, we've been doing, customer service, we've been doing, and because Zavmo has access to all of these standards, we have basically been able to map all these disparate roles, even though, quite frankly, I don't know anything about, asset management or, et cetera, et cetera. So they also had multiple frameworks, and that was also a real problem. So there was not a common understanding of whether you were a level 2 or a level 7 or what it was. And also not a common understanding of digital skills within and future skills necessary for each role. So this is a really easy way of basically just kind of benchmarking, this. So, in terms of the case study, what we've been able to do is provide that very kind of hyper-personalized experience for learners. It also integrates with all of the national OFQUAL. So that is basically all professional and academic qualifications that are delivered across the UK. So again, this is a huge framework which is open to anybody who wants to offer qualifications within the Commonwealth or within Europe. We've also ingested ISO standards. So for certain departments, they have certain standards they need to adhere to. And that's allowed us to help make the case studies and the role plays a lot more relevant for individual learners. And so, what's basically happened off the back of that pilot is that learners have got a fundamentally different approach towards learning because it's obviously directly relevant to their role. So it maps everything back to their role and makes everything much more relevant to the skills they're going to need, in the future. And the level of data that we've been able to get out the back end is absolutely incredible. So we use XAPI, tagging and flagging XAPI, and we're really able to get a lot more sensitivity data with regards to how people are thinking and feeling about their learning. So concentration times, cognitive load, their neurodiversity preferences, how they like to learn, when they want to learn, how long they want to learn. So people are on there for 3 hours because obviously they're just immersed in the experience. So lots of different learning that we've taken from the pilot. The next one I wanted to share with you is this is a L'Oreal case study. And what's so wonderful about the L'Oreal case study is just the sheer amount of engagement that L'Oreal get with their beauty advisors on the app. So they create new content all the time. It's not hyper-personalized, but it is new content moving through on their mobile. So this is a really, really strong mobile app. And we've had people that have logged in for 9,000 days or something crazy. That might not be true, 9,000 days. So correct me if I'm wrong, Harry. Apologies, I don't want to. But anyway, many, many, many years, they've logged in every single day to get new learning. And so a really exciting utilization of how you can kind of ramp up gamification and engagement in order to, really get people excited about their future development. So, it's been a very strong project. We've won multiple different awards with L'Oreal Travel Retail, Growth Engineering, and something that we are really, really proud of the work that we've done there. So, very happy to share more information on those two. So, look, I have literally, I don't know how I quite managed to shoehorn the last 20 slides into the last 20 minutes, but I could talk about these projects, all day. And certainly we are going to be doing more seminars specifically on AI and looking at how AI is going to roll out in learning and development. So if you are interested in joining, we have got a series of 4 more sessions that are specific in and around the utilization of the future of L&D. And we would love to have you join us on those. So we will, be communicating that out through LinkedIn and through our newsletters. And apologies for taking up all the time. If anyone has got any questions, I'd be delighted to stay on. And apologies that I didn't leave enough time.
Thank you, Juliet. Lots covered there. Lots of interesting stuff. If anyone does have time to stay for questions, then please do drop them in the chat now. Otherwise, the recording will be available after this, so you can always check out the questions on YouTube as well. So do feel free to drop them in the chat now. I do have one question from Michael, who mentioned that AI experts have identified the boundaries between human capabilities and those of Gen AI. And he's asking specifically about the element of trust in AI. He says there's still potentially a long way to go there to have that trust. So just wondered if you had any thoughts on that particular element of AI, Juliet.
Yes, I mean, I do, obviously, because this is something that I think about, all the time. So we are at Iridescent, we are actually going to be the second company that will have achieved their ISO 42001, which is a specific ISO for AI. And as part of that standard, one of the things that we need to think about is how the architecture of what we're building is basically impacted by, any number of different ways that AI can go rogue. And ultimately, the conclusion is that if you are building an AI specific for your organization, which is essentially what the Zabmo framework is, you need to have full and total transparency over your data lake. So that's the first thing. You really need to make some really tough decisions as to what you're allowing in your data lake. So there are lots of people who say, oh, well, can I, put in my Google Docs, or can I put in this, or can I let it open to the internet? Can I do this? The answer that we've come to so far in our pilots is no. So basically what you need to do is lock down your data lake, and you need to have full transparency of what is in your data lake. The other thing that you cannot do, in my view, is not have standards associated that have been externally verified for your learning. So this is why we use Ofqual. So there is no way that Zabmo can deliver any learning that has not been approved by national standards. Okay, so we're assuming that if the financial authority has approved, this is how you become, asset allocator, that basically that learning will be in line with an asset allocator's role. So the data lake is really important. The next thing that's really important that you have total control and visibility over the prompt layer. So the prompt layer is basically how the learner moves through, or how the individual is developed through the AI. And then finally, most importantly, you need to have a self-learning mechanism, okay? And this self-learning mechanism needs to, in conjunction with your AI technology provider, needs to be continually reviewed so that you make the right decisions over how your AI is learning, okay? So these three things very, very broadly make up, you know, how you will continually improve your AI. But the way you should think about your AI is very much like raising a child, right? So you start off with something which is, you know, it's okay. It's better than what we've got. It's not one size fits all, but it's where we need to get to. And so it's by providing full and utter transparency, ensuring that those people that are responsible for the data lake, the prompt layer, and the self-learning layer really do understand where the organization is trying to get to and where the organization is trying to get its people to. And if you have complete clarity on that, if there is a strategy, a learning strategy for your Zavmo AI, then ultimately you will be protected. But just to be clear, Zavmo AI doesn't go out into the open internet. This isn't Perplexity or, you know, Claude, or it's just completely different. It is your, you know, your AI for learning and development within your organization. It is, you know, and it's based on neuroscience. So the idea is that we are trying to maximize curiosity, attention, minimize, the adverse reaction in learning from learners. So yeah, interesting times.
Great. Thank you, Juliet. And Michael's message to say he agrees with all we've said there. So that's a good sign. I don't think we've got any further questions at the moment. I'm aware we are way past the hour, so maybe we will wrap things up there. I'd like to thank everyone very much for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the session and have found it informative. As Juliet mentioned, we do have further webinars coming up, so please do scan that QR code, and we'll also send a link out after the session via email. For those of you who have enjoyed the Modern Learner series, please do also check out our free guidebook on the topic. It goes into a lot more detail than we've been able to provide in these sessions. So I think you'll find it a useful resource. And again, just want to thank everyone. Thank Juliet for presenting today. And yeah, we'll leave things there. So thank you all, and we'll see you at the next session.
Lovely to see you all, and thank you, Harry, very much for organising. Absolutely excellent.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Cheers.
Bye-bye.